answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer
theatrics
the
are
question the
ridiculous.
way I asked it.
Chairman Jordan, I'm not going to get in the gutter with these people.
This is bigger than Watergate.
When I don't answer a question the way you want.
This goes over 4 administrations.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From lawmakers grilling Attorney General Pam Bondi about the Epstein files to President Trump's visit with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So let's dive right in. Attorney General Pam Bondi acknowledging the Epstein survivors who are in this House Judiciary Committee meeting. Let's listen in.
I am deeply sorry for what any victim has been through, especially as a result of that monster. If you have any information to share with law enforcement about anyone who has hurt you or abused you, the FBI is waiting to hear from you. I want you to know that any accusations of criminal wrongdoing will be taken seriously and investigated. The Department of Justice is committed to holding criminals accountable to the fullest extent of the law.
Good morning, Attorney General Bondi, right here. We are joined in this room by some of the thousands of survivors from Jeffrey Epstein's horrific sex trafficking ring. They have shown such incredible courage in speaking out, in demanding accountability to bring the predators and pedophiles to justice. The Epstein Files Transparency Act required your Department of Justice to disclose the perpetrators connected with Epstein's criminal activities and to redact the information of survivors to protect their identities. Let me show you what actually happened. First, in violation of the law, your department has shown a pattern of redacting the names of powerful predators. Here behind me is one example of an email from Epstein to a man whose name was redacted. The email reads, quote, "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." Only after members of Congress demanded that we see the unredacted files did the world learn the name of this individual, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the chairman and CEO of a company that had financial ties to President Trump's business and personal ties to Trump's advisor, Steve Bannon. Second, the survivors were not similarly protected, also in violation of the law. Here is another email titled Epstein Victim List. We have blurred the names of the survivors for their protection, but your Department of Justice initially released this list of 32 survivors' names with only one name redacted, along with numerous files that disclose not only the names, the emails, and the addresses of survivors, but also nude photographs and even the identities of Jane Does who had been protected for decades until your department released their names.
The July 2025 memo from your Department of Justice stated, quote, "We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties." These two photos, please put the photos back up. These two photos staring you in the face are evidence of a crime and more than enough evidence to predicate an investigation against former Prince Andrew. So I ask you, Attorney General Pam Bondi, why did you shut down this investigation last July, and why have you not prosecuted former Prince Andrew?
I don't believe you asked Merrick Garland these questions when he was Attorney General and set before.
I agree with you.
You twice.
I'm reclaiming my time.
Never
I agree with
mentioned
you. I agree with you. During
Did you not hear
the Biden administration, I called for people looking at Epstein files. Merrick Garland dropped the ball, as did Attorney General Bill Barr, as did Alex Acosta, a whole string of failures, but you are in charge. You have the power to change things, to hold these men accountable, and you're doing the opposite. You're protecting them. So I want to move on to another man.
Can I answer
Donald
that,
Trump.
though?
I want to move on to another
Can I
question.
answer your question about protecting
You answered
Prince
the
Andrew?
question.
You're saying no. I love this.
I want to discuss another man, Donald Trump, who is all over the Epstein files. Like former Prince. Here's the video. Like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those files
I'm reclaiming my time.
be released.
I got your answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Mr. Chairman, please
that
stop the clock.
he
Please
sign
stop the clock.
the legislation. This is
I'd like to reclaim my time.
Time belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you, here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was gonna stop a limo and hurt Donald Trump. And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide. No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately. Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized his operation.
Any victim who comes forward, of course, we would love to hear from them. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I'm reclaiming my time. I'm glad you're asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you don't-
bigger than
when you can't-
Watergate.
when I don't answer a question the way
This
you
goes
want.
over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
And that's
now,
where the
I want to
most
know at what
transparent-
point did the FBI and the DOJ decide that Lex Wessner was not a co-conspirator? Because our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you, please put it back on the screen, please, to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not, and it's not in the files, and it's not in the files for any of these other men.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
May she answer?
And he's a hypocrite because he voted against the ban that we were talking about on deep fake AI porn. Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
Maxwell was transferred from a federal correctional institution in Florida to a minimum security camp in Texas, which she, as a sex offender, would normally be ineligible for. At this new facility, as the ranking member talked about, and by the way, it's nicknamed Club Fed, we've heard reports that she's been afforded special privileges: puppy time, private workouts, personal mail, secretarial services. Attorney General Bondi, does a convicted sex offender like Ghislaine Maxwell deserve special treatment and privileges in prison? Yes or no?
Let me be crystal clear on this. No. And
Thank you.
let me keep
Perfect.
going. No, let me keep going.
Perfect. Well, I
did
have
not
a
know
few
she
more
was being
questions.
transferred.
I
and
asked you yes or
she
no.
was
and
not
I'm reclaiming my
transferred to a
time.
lower
Mr. Chairman,
level.
please stop the
Okay.
clock and remind the witness of the
Time.
rules. One rule she needs to
And I'm
understand
glad
here.
that we're agreeing. So when we're agreeing, we can move on to some other things.
And now let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. The FAA is lifting a ban on all flights around El Paso, Texas, after a brief closure this morning. A Trump administration official says that closure was tied to Mexican cartel drones and that the U.S. military disabled them. The FAA says there is no threat to commercial travel. All flights that were initially canceled are expected to resume as normal. At least 10 people are dead, including the shooter, and 25 others wounded after one of the worst school shootings in Canadian history. More than 30 people at Tumbler Ridge Secondary School, leaving 7 dead, including herself. Another person died at the hospital, and police say 2 other people were found dead at a nearby home. No word yet on a motive. The mayor of Tumbler Ridge says the whole community is grieving. Both Democrats and Republicans are calling for Howard Lutnick to resign. This after Trump's Commerce Secretary lied about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Back in October, Lutnick told the New York Post he only visited Epstein once and that it was before his 2008 conviction. But during testimony on Capitol Hill Tuesday, he admitted to traveling to Epstein Island and having lunch with the sex trafficker 4 years later.
I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or even philanthropy.
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children. We were on family vacation. We were not apart. To suggest there was anything untoward about that in 2012, I don't recall why we did it.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is defending Lutnick. She told reporters Tuesday that Lutnick, quote, remains a very important member of President Trump's team, and that President Trump fully supports him. Just ahead on Today as It Happened, President Trump took to Truth Social to boast about the latest economic jobs report. But the reality for job seekers is not quite so rosy. So stay with us. For Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett's reporting on the latest data after the break. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. All right, let's check back in on our daily briefing of the day's top stories. Market analysts have been watching what they're calling one of the most confusing labor market reads in years. And this morning, the first major economic data drop of 2026, the January jobs report, and it's better than expected. So it was released a short while ago. So let's bring in business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett. She joins us now to help us sort this all out. And Maura, what does this new data tell us?
Well, Holly, it was delayed a few days because of that brief partial government shutdown that we saw. But now that we have the numbers, it looks like hiring appears to have picked up to start the year. The economy added 130,000 jobs in January. That's stronger than many economists expected. Those forecasts were closer to 50,000 jobs. So this is nearly triple that. The unemployment rate dipped slightly, holding right around 4.3%. So that's still low. And then digging into the details a little bit more, we saw the biggest job gains in healthcare, social assistance, and construction. However, there is a big catch that I need to call out here. In the first jobs report of the year, we get revisions looking back at the data for 2024 and 2025 and making adjustments based on what actually happened in reality. And it turns out job growth in 2025 was much, much weaker than we originally thought. And so that data matching a little bit more of the sentiment that we've been hearing from people on the job market. Now, this frankly, stellar jobs report is notable because just yesterday we saw presidential advisor Peter Navarro seeming to be bracing for bad numbers. He offered a defense for the administration, kind of trying to get ahead of it, it seemed. And so I actually spoke with Mark Hamrick this morning. He's a senior economic analyst for Bankrate and asked him point blank, is this report an outlier or does it indicate some optimistic foreshadowing for the rest of the year? Here's what he told me.
A few things have been changing, and I think that could form the foundation for not robust jobs creation, but something that might be somewhat more reassuring. And I'll begin with the Federal Reserve having cut its benchmark interest rate 3 times at the end of last year. That reduces the cost of lending, that helps business, and that's a positive. It's also the fact that the pig has slowly been moving through the python with respect to the economy, adjusting to absorbing the real dramatic change in the economy, which is the tariffs that were broadly introduced in April of last year.
So a very graphic description of or metaphor, I guess I should say, of how the economy is moving. But I think it paints the right picture in terms of how slowly these types of numbers change oftentimes. And so he also went on to talk about potential income growth that we might see in tax returns as the One Big Beautiful Bill takes effect. And so that was yet another point he wanted to make in terms of how we might see a more balanced economy coming into 2026, Holly.
We picked up on that metaphor, too, all here in our control room. All right, Maura, before I let you go, there is a bizarre conflict that we're seeing, relatively low employment, but it's really also a tough job market for job seekers. What exactly is happening?
So according to federal data, on average, job searches are now stretching to last about 6 months. There are more job seekers on the market than job openings, and that's for the first time since 2021. And then zooming out, especially when you look at those revisions I was just talking about, the economy added the fewest jobs last year since 2003 outside of recession times. Now, there's a combination of factors to blame here. First, baby boomers are aging and retiring, the population growth is slowing, and there's been a sharp reduction in immigration and an increase in deportation. So think about this as a supply issue in terms of the people that have the opportunity to take up some of these jobs. But then when you look at the demand, that's shrinking too. The large employers are decreasing team sizes after they overhired during the pandemic. And then there's been these high levels of uncertainty business-wise around the Trump administration's sudden shifts in domestic policy, and that impacts companies directly. Think about tariffs. That's what we've heard the Federal Reserve talk about endlessly in terms of spurring inflationary tendencies. And then adding to all of that, there's this growing anxiety about artificial intelligence potentially replacing certain white-collar roles. And so that fear has rattled industries like software, insurance, and even wealth management. And so even though we have this strong headline number coming out of the top of the jobs report released today, it's important to understand that context as to why a lot of Americans aren't feeling that growth. They're actually facing this much tougher job market, Holly.
Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett. Thank you, Maura. Straight ahead on Today As It Happened.
These are bad precedents that Republicans are creating. They want to bring in a former president, for a deposition. Now they want to indict former members when there's a Democrat in the White House. I mean, these are now new norms. That's what happens.
Thanks for staying with us on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. I'm here with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
Democratic senators just holding a news conference after a federal grand jury failed to indict them. 6 of those senators, including Senator Alyssa Slotkin and Mark Kelly, were accused by the Justice Department of sedition. Follows that video where they inform members of the military that they can resist illegal orders. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live on Capitol Hill. And Nate, Senator Slotkin called it embarrassing for the Trump administration. I'm curious, what else did she have to say?
Yeah, the message from these Democrats was that they will continue to speak up against the Trump administration, or rather in defense of the rule of law, which is how they view that effective public service announcement that they filmed, many months ago, that President Trump later called for, charges of sedition against those Democratic lawmakers. And yesterday, that announcement that a grand jury, that report that a grand jury declined to press charges, certainly a sign that the Trump administration was looking to target those individual Democratic lawmakers. And to be clear, there was some indication that, they had already been targeted. Senator Mark Kelly, he has faced an investigation from inside the Department of Defense from Secretary Hegseth into possibly lowering his rank, despite the fact that he is retired from the U.S. Air Force. So a lot of questions about what direction the Trump administration is going. Democrats accusing them of effectively weaponizing the Department of Justice. And now some Democrats saying that Republicans here are just setting a precedent that a future Democratic Congress could theoretically follow. Take a listen.
These are bad precedents that Republicans are creating. They want to bring in a former president, for a deposition. Now they want to indict former members. I mean, this is escalatory behavior. This place only responds with escalatory behavior. And so, look, when Hakeem gets the gavel and when there's a Democrat in the White House, I mean, these are now new norms. That's what happens.
What's interesting here is there have not been many Republicans who've come to the defense of these Democratic lawmakers who made that video. I just caught up with one, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who told me that these Democrats were clearly goading members of the military to refuse legal orders. Others have said that, this was a not necessary video for Democrats to tape in the first place, that this was effectively goading service members into ignoring the Trump administration. I caught up with Congressman Carlos Jimenez of Florida, who told me this. The fact that the DOJ even took that step of trying to seek charges against sitting members of Congress who theoretically benefit from the First Amendment and speech and debate clauses of the Constitution, does that concern you?
Well, what concerns me is that if members of Congress are trying to get the members of the military not to carry out lawful orders, yeah, that does concern me. Now, again, that's all subject to interpretation. They technically did not, because all they said, do not violate, you don't have to follow unlawful orders. Well, that's like the first thing you learn in military school. You don't follow unlawful orders. Again, that was redundant. It was just a political act. That's what I saw it as. Would I have pressed charges? Probably not.
And again, those Democratic lawmakers taped a video saying that members of the military should refuse orders that are either unlawful or run counter to the Constitution. That is in large part why President Trump has then targeted these 6 Democrats, 4 of whom holding a press conference the next couple hours up here on Capitol Hill. Del?
Yeah, the charge of sedition, though, carries with it the death penalty, which is one of the reasons why so many are taking it so seriously. Our congressional correspondent, Nathaniel Reed, for us live on Capitol Hill. Nate, as always, thanks for keeping us up to date.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
I believe the FAA owes the community and the country an explanation as to why this happened so suddenly and abruptly and was lifted so suddenly and abruptly.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of the biggest stories. So let's pick up right where we left off.
Major cuts in staffing could be coming to the Kennedy Center. It comes ahead of that major renovation under President Trump. On Tuesday, the center telling employees that most departments will be reduced to skeleton teams. Some operations paused until a planned reopening in 2028. They say the goal is to maintain core operations while preparing for the reopening. Renamed the Trump Kennedy Center by its board last year, the venue is expected to close as early as July. One of the world's largest food companies is staying intact for now. Kraft and Heinz are pausing plans to split. The new CEO says he thinks the company's challenges are fixable. Kraft Heinz now plans to invest about $600 million into research and marketing to boost its profits. The company's portfolio of brands include Oscar Mayer, Kool-Aid, and Miracle Whip. The FAA says they are now lifting that ban on all flights around El Paso, Texas, after a brief and at times mysterious closure this morning. A Trump administration official saying the closure was tied to Mexican cartel drones that breached U.S. airspace, saying the military disabled them. The FAA saying there is no threat to commercial travel. All flights that were at first canceled are expected to resume as normal. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra has been working his sources all morning, gathering information about what this was all about. And Patrick, what can you tell us at this hour?
Well, I can tell you that the Pentagon and the White House, they are not wanting to give a lot of information about what led to this unprecedented shutdown of airspace around El Paso. Keep in mind that closing airspace like this around a city for what was supposed to be 10 days, we haven't seen something like that since 9/11, really unprecedented stuff. This is a statement that we just got from the Department of Defense not too long ago. Quote, Mexican cartel drones breached U.S. airspace. The Department of War took action to disable the drones, and the FAA and Department of War have determined that there is no threat to commercial travel. Now, what the statement doesn't say is exactly how many drones were targeted. Were they taken down by a laser? And the reason that is significant is because of a tweet from someone at the Department of Defense in their innovation office, tweeting a photo of laser, and this is clearly an illustration, a laser shooting down a drone with a bald eagle in front of it, and in that message saying, defend the homeland. So no confirmation that this was some sort of laser that had been taken down a drone, but this is something that has been talked about for quite some time in Washington, especially Capitol Hill. What to do about the Mexican cartels flying drones over into, sometimes, El Paso. El Paso and Juarez, Mexico, are right next to each other, and drone activity has been spotted over El Paso many, many times. The president of Mexico, weighing in this morning, said that nothing unusual happened last night or today with regard to drone activity that might explain this unprecedented action. That action coming down about 11 p.m. last night from the FAA, doing a notice to airmen saying that the airspace was closed for 10 days because of national security concerns. We heard from Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. This is her district. She is a Democrat. She said that she had to find out from a federal worker that this had happened, and that as she has begun to start to learn information about what went on, this explanation about Mexican cartel drones being shot down isn't adding up. This was her earlier today.
The information coming from the administration does not add up, and it's not the information that I was able to gather overnight and this morning. I believe the FAA owes the community and the country an explanation as to why this happened so suddenly and abruptly and was lifted so suddenly and abruptly.
This was obviously a major disruption to a city of 700,000 people. This is a major airport in El Paso. There is some indication that perhaps there was a lack of coordination between the Department of Defense and the FAA. And you're looking at a control tower right now. That's actually a DCA in Washington, D.C. And it's interesting because it was just a year ago that the military came under major, major criticism for not coordinating with the FAA when it was doing training flights. And of course, that led to tragedy. Over 60 people killed in a helicopter, Army helicopter versus American Airlines flight. So this issue of the FAA communicating with the military perhaps continues again. Did the FAA simply take a step here to pause all operations to avoid another issue like that if anti-drone technology was being tested? That is the big question, especially because the Fort Bliss Army post in El Paso is right there. Del.
Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpster for us live in our D.C. newsroom. Patrick, thank you very much. And a reminder, we will be back with more from Pam Bondi, who is testifying live on Capitol Hill. That is after the break. You're watching Scripps News.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch. Not on our time. No way. And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, oh, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Okay, let's jump right back into our rundown of the day's top stories.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand. Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through with the absolutely unacceptable release of the Epstein files and their information?
Members get to ask the questions, the witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer. The Attorney General can
That's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she doesn't like the
my
answer.
time.
On Capitol Hill today, Attorney General Pam Bondi facing blistering questions. Most of those questions center around how her Justice Department handled the Epstein files. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein packed today's hearing. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller has been following the Epstein case for years. She's live on Capitol Hill. And Alex, it was a frustrating hearing. Whenever a question about Epstein came up, there was no new substantial information. How are survivors reacting?
Yeah, they are very frustrated. I talked to one of them who was inside, and she told me it's incredibly intense in that room for many reasons. Likely, we have Republicans who questioned her about a variety of other issues. Only one of them, Congressman Thomas Massie, the author of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, asking Bondi about the Epstein files, anything related to the department's handling of it. The rest of them did not touch this subject. And when Democrats questioned her, a lot of them took the bulk of their times to talk at her and only asked very quick questions, not giving her a ton of time to respond. But when she did, whether she interrupted them or when she got time to answer the questions, she did not answer their questions at all and answered in an incredibly hostile way. So we really have not walked away from this hearing with any new information. The only new piece of info that we really got here was confirmation during an exchange with Congressman Ted Lieu, a Democrat, who asked her about the photos that we saw of an unredacted girl with former Prince Andrew. He confirmed that that was the photo of a victim. And then he questioned her about why she didn't do a further investigation, why she said that they're turning the page on this issue if there was these kinds of images in the file. She, again, did not answer this question. Another Democrat asking her specifically about members of the Trump administration and whether they have been interviewed by the department. Listen to this incredibly fiery exchange.
Has the Justice Department specifically asked Secretary Lutnick about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein?
He has addressed those ties himself.
Has the DOJ asked Secretary Phelan about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know whether he has addressed those or not.
Has the Deputy Secretary Feinberg talked to the Department of Justice about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein? Yes or no? Has the Department of Justice talked to Deputy Secretary Feinberg about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, which are clearly spelled out in the files? It's a very simple question. It's not a trick question. I'm just asking you.
Yeah, I'm stunned that you want to continue talking about.
Oh my gosh.
Epstein
Okay, I'm reclaiming my time. I'm asking you not a trick question, a simple question. Oh, for goodness sakes, this is pathetic. This is pathetic, Mr. Chair. I am not asking trick questions here. The American people have a right to know the answers to this. These are senior officials in the Trump administration. This is not a game, Secretary.
I'm Attorney General.
My apologies, I couldn't tell.
And Del, when we heard from Congressman Massie about this, remember, he is the one leading the charge on this. He did show a few files that he said were good examples of the issues that the department has had. One of them being that Les Wexner, someone who has now been named as a co-conspirator, that file that named him as such was redacted. And Bondi said effectively that he's named in other files, Massie pointing out that the other files do not name him as a co-conspirator and that he essentially had to shame the Department of Justice to unredact that name. And so there was definitely no love lost between the two of them either. She called him a failed politician and a hypocrite.
Alex, I want to circle back, though, to the survivors. The issue of survivors or victims' names not being redacted was a major concern during the hearing. Did they get any sense of resolution to their concerns?
I don't believe so. The one thing that Bondi said about this was that if people's names are redacted, or unredacted rather, and they want them redacted, that they should reach out to the FBI. Now, multiple times Democrats had the survivors stand up and raise their hands if they had not been contacted by the DOJ. They all raised their hands, essentially saying none of them have been. And they all also raised their hands saying that they wanted to speak with the Department of Justice. So what happens after this, we really do not know. I think the thing we need to be paying attention to, in part, is that members of Congress are going to the DOJ to view these files themselves. They're not allowed to go in with technology or their staff, but they are taking note of a lot of these documents. And they had said that they were waiting to see what happened with Bondi on the Hill today before they would name some of these people, release some of this information. That did not happen today. And so now it's really in members of Congress' hands of how they want to handle this if the Department of Justice is not going to unredact those names themselves.
Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live for us on Capitol Hill. Alex, as always, thank you very much for your reporting. Dawson's Creek actor James Vanderbeek has died. He had been public about his struggles with colorectal cancer, undergoing cancer treatment in 2024 for stage 3 cancer, which he described as the hardest year of his life. Vanderbeek was 48. 20 dead, 33 injured as tropical cyclone slams into Madagascar. The cyclone, named Izanzi, collapsed houses across the Indian Ocean island with high winds and rain. Winds were clocked at 121 miles an hour. That triggered warnings of floods and landslides. Izanzi moved across the large island of more than 31 million people, many of them living in poverty. Close to 3,000 were forced to evacuate. President Trump hosting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House today. Both leaders discussing growing tensions with Iran over that country's nuclear program. They also talked about developments towards the peace efforts in Gaza. This meeting is the 5th time that Netanyahu and the president have met at the White House since Donald Trump returned to office. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is live on the North Lawn now. And Haley, what did we learn from today's meeting?
Del, that meeting lasting about 2.5 hours here at the White House with an apparent focus on Iran without a concrete outcome, but with an indication that President Trump prefers and is continuing efforts for negotiations with Iran. President Trump writing on Truth Social, nothing definitive was reached in his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but that he, quote, insisted that negotiations with Iran continue to see whether or not a deal can be consummated. At the same time, President Trump indicated he continues to retain options at his disposal, hearkening back to the last round of talks with Iran last year that ultimately led to the U.S. Striking Iranian missile sites. At the same time, Prime Minister's office said Prime Minister Netanyahu emphasized Israel's security needs in that vein. Now, while we have seen some other nations in the Middle East region seek to avoid further escalation, and we have seen Iran undertake a flurry of diplomatic activity and outreach to many of them, Netanyahu in recent days has urged U.S. officials that Iran can't be relied on while pushing for negotiations that both limit Iran's ballistic missile program and their support for proxy groups. Now, Iranian officials in public remarks have appeared to draw red lines against including its missile programs in negotiations and abandoning enrichment entirely. Of course, what President Trump has repeatedly stressed is no nuclear weapons for Iran, meaning no weapons enrichment in that vein. Trump also telling Axios in an interview just this week that he is considering deploying a second carrier strike group to the Middle East, which is notable as we see a balance between the president stressing and undertaking negotiations and a consistent statement that he believes Iran wants a deal while also retaining his options on the table at the same time. Additionally, Del, Gaza was expected to be a central theme in their discussions today. The Prime Minister's office indicating that was among the topics talked about. Netanyahu's office earlier today announcing he did indeed join the Board of Peace. That is the board that is overseeing the governance of Gaza as President Trump is pushing from phase 1 to phase 2 of his peace plan for that region, Del.
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull for us live on the North Lawn. Haley, thank you very much.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
None of you should be threatened, ever. None of your children should be threatened. None of your families should be threatened. And I will work with, you can come into my office any day. I will work with all of you on both sides of the aisle.
The manhunt for Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper is still on. The man in Arizona they were looking for and took in and questioned yesterday was released today, telling reporters he had nothing to do with the kidnapping, also saying he doesn't watch the news and didn't even know who Today Show host Savannah Guthrie was.
The FBI pulled out the Miranda rights, and he read me Miranda rights, and that's when I asked, so I'm being arrested? Yeah. They're like, no, we're just reading your Miranda rights so we can ask you some questions. What kind of questions? It's about a kidnapping. What I didn't kidnap no one. They told my mother-in-law. Okay. They showed her a video. Yeah, because they said that my eyes and my eyelashes look the same. To clear my name. Yeah. That's all I want.
This is the video he was talking about. The FBI releasing the video recovered from Guthrie's doorbell camera. Shows a man with face coverings and a gun messing with an S-cam. The 84-year-old has not been seen since the night of January 31st. An unusual moment of civility in what was a contentious hearing on Capitol Hill today. It involved Attorney General Pam Bondi and California Congressman Eric Swalwell.
The president can come after me. It's fine. I'm in the arena. So are these folks. But we never expected that the Department of Justice would not seek to prosecute and investigate those who are making threats against us. And that would include those on that side of the aisle. And I'm just asking for your help to protect life, because life is at risk with the environment we're in right now.
Congressman, I completely agree with you. I know about several of those personally involving you. I believe one has been charged publicly, and there's something I would be happy to talk to you about off camera, but I can assure you that they are very serious. They are being looked into, and I can give you more details on those. None of you should be threatened, ever. None of your children should be threatened. None of your families should be threatened. And I will work with, you can come into my office any day. I will work with all of you on both sides of the aisle if you are ever threatened. And I'll gladly talk to you after this hearing about your cases. But I can tell you some of them are very active.
Appreciate that. I yield back.
That was a rare moment of understanding on Capitol Hill earlier this morning. And we just want to give you an idea of some of the instances of political violence that we've seen even recently, as last month. Remember that situation with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar? While she was doing a meeting in her district, someone threw an item towards her, liquid towards her. You're watching that video right there. And then at a certain moment, you saw the Congresswoman walk towards that person. That person has now been charged, and the Congresswoman, we should note, is okay. And then there was a situation in that same state last year where the Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman, along with her husband, they were assassinated. Officials say someone was impersonating a police officer, walked up to her door and shot and killed them. And the Speaker of the House's daughter, she was possibly also a target there, but she survived. So that was another instance. And then last April, remember the mansion, the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania, that was set on fire while Governor Josh Shapiro, along with his family members, were inside. They are all okay. That suspect in that case pleaded guilty. And then a few years back in 2022, just right before the midterms, there was this major case out of California where the husband of Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Paul Pelosi, he was attacked by someone who walked into their home and started beating him with a hammer. Paul Pelosi, of course, he survived there, but he was badly beaten, an 82-year-old person who was attacked there, and that person also faced charges. And then who can forget the situation, the circumstances with President Donald Trump? 2 assassination attempts in the case of President Donald Trump. You're looking at images there from Butler, Pennsylvania, and someone shot towards him, injured candidate Trump at that point.
Thank you so much for spending some of your evening with us here at Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have a wonderful Wednesday night.